Thank you.
Ian. And we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for once again tuning into the spoiler room as we get through our Scarred Faces month here in the spoiler room. We have we've been covering some great movies, two so far. We covered Mr. Scarface, and last week we covered the 1932 Scarface, the original. And so today we are looking at the 83 remake 40 years ago last year. Holy crap. Can you believe that already? 40 years ago. And
No.
yeah, I can't either. And so we are looking at Scarface from 1983 with Mr. Al Pacino. And I've got a lovely crew with me tonight to talk about this film. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink with us as we talk movie spoilers. With me tonight, I have a wonderful crew, as I mentioned. First off, he's from the establishingshot.org. It is none other than Mr. Jeff York. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good,
Awesome.
good. Thank you for taking a break from awards voting to talk about this classic film. So I appreciate that. and with us as well, fresh out of the shower and keeps coming back for more, it's none other than the one and only Mr. Ian Simmons. How you doing, Ian?
We're giving away industry secrets now.
We are giving industry.
I'm doing great. I'm spiffy and ready to go.
That's how we get the extra viewers. We talk about Ian in the shower. See, we're not showing it, but we're just talking about it. So, people read the transcripts. They're like, wait, what? And then they'll tune in and they're like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. I think they'll be very pleased to see such a handsome man in the right corner of their screen.
Exactly. Yeah, he is in the right corner.
I'm touched, guys. But not in the shower sense.
Not in the shower sense. Who isn't touched but on a rampage is the main character, who is also the title character of our film tonight, which is Scarface 1983 from Mr. Director himself, Brian De Palma, again here in the spoiler room. We just keep coming back to De Palma. I don't know how that keeps happening, but we just seem to keep talking about it.
Mark, not to derail you already, but I wanted to say, because they just had, again, we were talking about award shows before we went live tonight, and they're cramming a lot into a couple of weeks. And I think last weekend, they just gave out the well, maybe it was this weekend, I forget, but they had the Governor's Awards, the special Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it makes me always wonder, like, who they haven't given it to that they could. I mean, this year, one of the honorees was Mel Brooks, and he's won an Oscar in competition. So it's not really like he needed one. And arguably, I'm not sure how many great films he's done in his oeuvre. But I was talking to a friend about that, and we were discussing the fact that, really Brian De Palma's had quite a few, and I just don't think they're ever going to get around, because he's, kind of a renegade and sort of the John Carpenters and some of those kind of people who they barely honor horror anyway. Toni Collette couldn't get a Best Actress nomination for Hereditary. They're still not kind of coming around on most of this, but anyway, it's another, like, wow, yeah, for all of the very De Palma films we talked about last time, this one is very much a De Palma film, but also, not entirely a typical De Palma film, but still, I think it was a big hit, and it's only, I think, kind of gained in reputation over the decades. And the more you watch it, the more you go, wow, this was kind of at the zenith of his powers in some respects, and maybe some of his faults too, but nonetheless.
Well, I think, partially, I know we're just kind of diving right into it, but
just dive right into it.
I think partially it does feel like a De Palma film, but it also feels like an Oliver Stone film, because Oliver Stone wrote the movie, and it's almost like this perfect, match. You've got De Palma's style, and then Stone's like obsession with kind of American, I was going to say Americana, but like the dark side of Americana, and conspiracy and money and crime. It works so well together. It's funny,
and they both have a taste for the lurid.
Yes,
of course.
Oh, yeah. But it's funny, because we were talking about the 32 Scarface, which I watched for the first time for last week's show, and I was just amazed by the parallels between both movies. I knew that this was a remake of the 32 version, but I didn't know how beat for beat, like story-wise, just about it was. And Mark, we were kind of discussing, I think, in our Facebook chat with Joe Randazzo, who couldn't be with us tonight. You guys got the deluxe cocaine briefcase Scarface set, right?
This is an amazing. Unfortunately, my audio only viewers will not be able to see it, but yes, a number of years ago, I got this Al Pacino anniversary Scarface box set. I think it was like the 20th anniversary or something.
Wow.
And anyway, so check this thing out though. Let's see if I can do this. So you open it up, and there is inside the box is a montage, a collage of pictures from the movie. And I haven't opened them yet even, but it comes with like 8 lobby cards. Here,
back when they had lobby cards.
They had lobby cards. And inside, of course, this is how old this is. This is the DVD of Scarface. And when I first got this, I'm like, okay, but the insert, which I kept as well because I'm like that, I kept the insert. It says that there's a money clip and the original in here. Where is that? Well, secretly, to hide from the IRS, it has a removable piece. And there's Scarface, and there is the money clip with Tony Montana's signature emblem on it as well. So, yeah.
What happened to the Omar action figure on the helicopter? They don't have that in that set? Jeez.
No, it's not in it. And I think Funko Pop couldn't get the rights.
Oh, maybe that's what they're waiting for, the Funko Pop.
Oh my gosh, I can just see that. But no, it's funny because I pulled out this is a Blu-ray Steelbook that I had.
Sure.
I bought it years ago, and I discovered a little surprise because I watched the original Scarface, I think, on YouTube last week.
Yeah.
I actually have the DVD of that. It's in this case, hidden behind the Blu-ray.
Wow.
I always thought it was like the DVD copy of the 83 film, but no, I pulled out the Blu-ray of 83, and behind it was like the old-fashioned Scarface logo. I'm like, oh, that's great. I actually own it because I was thinking after watching it last week, I have to own this movie. Turns out I already did.
Well,
it is funny how those copyright laws let those movies now become available on YouTube.
Well,
the lapsing of them.
They're not exactly. Don't get me started on YouTube copyright. That's a whole show, and you'll hear me rant. The 17-year-old veteran of YouTube, and how people get away with showing full movies, yet I get dinged for showing one poster from a freaking Liam Neeson movie that he was on a train. And he was an action guy, and I showed the poster, and they literally blocked my video from 250 countries for showing one still from the movie. So don't get me started on that.
Maybe they were trying to protect those countries from that film, though, Mark.
They could have been protecting him, but luckily no one's protected tonight from Scarface.
What do you mean the dining car is closed?
And yes, we talked about the original one last week, and it's been a little while since I watched this one. And you're right, Ian, watching the 83 Scarface, while it's dressed differently, the sets are dressed differently. If you look at the situations that we get in here, they are beat for beat from the original. They're just mashed up in the De Palma way, aesthetic, but it's still the same pretty much beats in this. And that was what blew me away, is because I thought this was quite a bit different than the original or when I first watched it. But now watching it again back to back, I'm like, oh shit, no. I mean, we've got, down to the assassination attempt scene, which, after watching the original 30s one where he's on his own, he drops off his sister, because he's all upset, and then they take a pot shot at him. And then you watch this one, and yes, folks, we're going to jump around because this movie's like, 40 years old. And in this one, you get the scene where he sees his sister with some jabroni on the floor, takes her into the bathroom. He goes in there and just like, hey man, don't touch my sister. And then, kicks him out, man. And then he gets his buddy to take her home. And then I'm like, oh, I know this scene. And then he's sitting there by himself. And I'm like, oh, I know this scene too. And then I'm just sitting there going, it's all clicking into place. It's like, wow, this really is far closer to a remake than I thought it was.
Yeah, and even to the point where they have the world is yours. You know, in the original, I think it was some kind of
It was
a
on a
product
sign.
that,
It was a
yeah,
sign, yeah, for
it's a
the
billboard.
airline. Yeah.
And this one, it's on a blimp that he sees sort of at dawn. It's like the
Yeah.
world is yours, and it's Pan American. There's just so much meaning wrapped up to it. The more I watch this film, and I've seen it a few times over the years, it changes meaning for me and also grows in estimation. I know it's kind of this pop cultural throwaway. I mean, it was big among like the hip hop and kind of gangster rap community back in like the 90s, particularly because of the iconography of Tony Montana with that big gun and you want to play rough. And I know it was sampled in a bunch of like rap songs and stuff, but it's a great, I think, drama. And the performances are top notch. And when I see Pacino's commitment, I went back and I rewatched that closing 10 minutes of the assault on his compound. Man, just he's amazing. From waking up from a coke fueled stupor, crying over his sister who he lost because he's sad about his sister and the fact that he didn't get to frankly sleep with his sister while she was alive, to just like blowing everybody away. It's yeah, I'll say it's a masterpiece.
And you know what? It's also, I dare say, I think the kind of masterpiece that we don't give enough talk to in the world of film, and that is the movies that are sometimes pulpy, sometimes a little trashy, sometimes a little bit vulgar. People like Pauline Kael used to champion those kind of films, and she was a big, famous critic for doing so. And you think about movies that at the time, like this one, was not very well received, as were some of the other movies in the early 80s, which is kind of shocking when you think of like The Thing wasn't well received and this wasn't well received. And then even as you go through the 80s, movies like Die Hard were hits and struck a chord with audiences. But you look at that movie now, it's like it's the most influential movie in the last 20, 30 years. And it's so well done. And I've always argued that the greatest Bond villain since maybe Aura Goldfinger was actually Hans Gruber. He just wasn't in a James Bond movie. But, it's funny how I guess sometimes whether, it's the test of time or changing thoughts about things. But, you look at this film now and you realize there is a lot of artistry in there's incredible tension, there's some very strong performances, there's some big shocks that really are weighty scenes in the movie. I mean, I'll just, since we're bouncing around a little bit, if you don't mind me saying,
go ahead.
I still to this day think one of the hardest scenes to sit through and watch, and yet it's so spectacularly done, is when Tony, the Al Pacino character, and Manny, his right hand, Stephen Bauer, visit Frank at like 3 a.m. after the failed attempt at him, and he turns, Robert Loggia as Frank into a crying on his knees baby, begging for his life. And then even worse in some respects after that is Harris Yulin as the cop who's on the take and basically is telling Tony that he's going to take a cut of his stuff. And he's sitting there quiet and arrogant and saying like, I told him not to do it. I told him this. And then he gets shot in the stomach, and it takes him a couple minutes to get the second shot and die. And he's like, wait a minute, I can fix this. And it's like, I still find that shocking. I remember when I saw that, I think I was in college when this movie came out. Thinking, God damn, that is, I mean, I was kind of shook by that. And I've watched it like you, Ian, probably every couple of years. I mean, I didn't have to watch it before this show, Mark, because I know it so well. I thought this one I can talk. Probably 10 years ago, I saw it or whatever it was. I still remember who well, but that still is a shocking scene. And, it's been decades for me too since then. But it stands up, and I think in some respects the stuff that it does really well, it does really, really well. I mean, even that, the very De Palma scene where Stephen Bauer is chatting with the girl on the street while they're waiting for Tony to do the deal, and the camera just goes up the stairs to the window and then down, and here's Tony Montana watching his partner's arm cut off with a buzzsaw. I mean, that's just excruciating, but it's really well done. It's artistic violence. Like there's maybe the best kind of version of that.
I gotta ask though, because this is something when I picked up the last time I watched it, and I don't know if it's a flub or if I just missed a detail, but when Tony and that guy go to the hotel to make that deal, and they end up getting ambushed, and his friend gets handcuffed to the shower rail, and they just take him apart with a chainsaw. They bring Tony in there next, and I didn't see any body or any body parts or not nearly enough blood. Like, what? Where did that corpse go?
I'll bet you dollars to donuts he had to cut that shit to get an R.
Oh, there's
because I know that they had to cut a number of scenes in all of the De Palma films to get the R. So my guess is they probably showed some greater carnage, but they couldn't get away with that further.
No, it's not even that. It's like literally when they put him up in that bathroom in that
there should be more blood
stall,
everywhere.
It should have looked like the Leatherface's slaughterhouse, but it
should have looked like that elevator from The Shining. You're not going to get that clean. You just aren't going to get that clean. Guys.
Are you talking about after they chop his buddy up and they start trying to handcuff him?
I mean, imagine the
after they try to because there is plenty of blood, but you're right. After they cut him up and they're going to start cutting up Tony. You're right. There isn't another body.
Well, it should have been all over everybody.
It should have been.
I mean, they should have just been drenched in blood.
It's kind of interesting. I was watching this going, did Al Pacino have it so that he doesn't get, like in his contract, he doesn't get splattered with blood? Because while his buddy's getting chopped up, you watch him. There's the shower curtain. Yeah. His face, they're pushing his face so he sees it. But the shower curtain conveniently covers Al Pacino's face just as the blood is spurting all over. It just happens to cover his face. And I'm like, okay, that's just a little too convenient.
Speaking of Al Pacino, his power as an actor and everything else, maybe, his ability as a star to get that kind of coverage or uncoverage, if you will, in the contract. It's hard to believe that was made just like a decade after The Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he looks pretty young in it, and you're thinking like, he's so quiet and so kind of still as Michael. And, here is kind of one of his first big kind of out there performances. I mean, you could argue that he sort of did that with And Justice for All, but it's really only the last scene where he kind of loses his shit. But in this movie, I mean, from the get-go, he's got the thick accent, and it's almost comical when you first come back to it. It's like, wow, I wonder if he would have gone that broad today if he was doing it, but I don't know if anybody would have, probably on all kinds of levels.
Well, I mean, and I talked about this last year just as kind of a question is, it's very easy to look back on a movie 40 years on and say, oh, because and pieces have been written about this. People have commented, oh, it's a racist performance. How can you have? I mean, essentially, most of this movie features Italians playing, Cubans or other versions of Hispanic, right? But it's 1983. You got like one of the biggest stars in the world playing this movie. Like, he is an actor, so it's kind of his job to take on parts that aren't necessarily him. So is it, you called it broad, and I understand that, but I don't know if it's broad, because I certainly have met people of all different kind of nationalities who, when you talk to them, they talk. It's kind of like hard to find that line between what is caricature no pun intended, Jeff, versus something that is sort of an accurate-ish reflection of people you might meet on the street. Because the sad reality is there are some people who talk like stereotypes.
Right. Well, it's funny too, because in the 80s, when certain people were playing gangsters, they did a lot of stuff with their mouth or their chin. I mean, even like Jack Nicholson in Prince's Honor, he kind of has that face. And Leo did it in Killers of the Flower Moon just recently, kind of the Billy Bob Thornton thing. But I think for me, it's not as much with the accent, but I think the fact that really the expression that Pacino has on his face almost the entire movie is this.
Yeah. Well, but
that's a little broad to hold that face the entire time. But he pushes it, but it's also, he's realizing that this is pulp, and you have to push it a little bit, I think, for the pulp.
The thing I liked about that expression and his whole kind of demeanor is you realize just how short he is. And I think it might be one of the few Pacino performances I can really think of that plays up the fact that he's, not a very tall leading man, which plays into his sort of complex of like, he's a Cuban immigrant. He is a criminal. He wants to rise to the top. He wants the respect. He wants to be the big man, even though he's not. So he's got almost like this Napoleon complex. So that constant scowl, that constant attitude, the constant showing off.
Yep.
It's a great contrast compared to the people that he meets in the movie who are bigger than him and ultimately end up signing his death contract. They're like the suave, kind of laid back,
Yes,
old
right.
school guys. Even was it? Oh my gosh,
Sousa.
Sousa.
Oh my God, Paul Chenier. What a great voice, and he's this elegant, sort of erudite. Tony, I like you. There's no bullshit.
There's no lying in you.
No,
yes,
no lying in you. That's right.
He's like a villain from Magnum PI, for crying out loud.
Or Miami Vice.
Or Miami Vice. He's like
it's
but
so
even
true.
Between him and Robert Loggia as Frank, still sounds so stupid. Robert Loggia as Frank Lopez, but there are these constant examples of everything that Tony Montana wants, but he thinks that he has to act a certain way to get where he really doesn't. It's
that's a great point, Ian, because I suppose he enters the room with that chip on his shoulder, and he has to already put up the kind of fuck you face because he's a foreigner, he's small, he's done some time and probably been pushed around. All of us, even his mother's bitching at him the whole time, so he has to grab the power when he can, and part of it is that face.
See, and I in all honesty, I think it plays into everybody's, you talk about his accent and people talk about his racist performance and that, but if you look at it, it's almost as if Tony's even playing up his own accent to be the tougher guy. Because if you look at how his buddy Manny talks, buddy Manny talks a bit too, but he doesn't talk. It feels like Tony is purposely playing up his Cuban accent and his Cuban descent and his origins and that, and how tough he's playing it up far more than what maybe he naturally is. Whereas Manny, you look at Manny, he's not nearly as much of a character as Tony Montana is.
No, I mean, Manny is the kind of guy that you could naturally see working for Sosa and maybe even becoming his number two.
Right.
But I think Tony recognizes, I mean, not only the fact that they're friends, but I think he needs that balance to kind of keep them, in line. Because, Manny acts as his voice of conscience somewhat, and even the kind of like, pull back, just calm down a little bit. Yeah, and Stephen Bauer gives a great performance in this. The only performance that I think is kind of questionable in this movie and might lean into that, well, you probably shouldn't have gone with that accent, is, as much as I love her, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. She was like, I think 19 when she did this movie or some ridiculous thing. So I'm a little more forgiving, but yeah.
Well, it's funny too, because all of the people who we just are talking about it being, for whatever the word is, broad or caricature or whatever, they very rarely gave a performance that was like that before. I mean, they're not bad actors. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio is a very good actor, and often a very subtle actress. I mean, her performance in The Color of Money not only got her an Oscar nomination for supporting actress, but she is a stone cold, like, I will only act sort of from A to F in this. And she's great in that, a very controlled performance. And, Pacino turned around for De Palma a few years later and did Carlito's Way, which I think is one of his most underrated performances. He's fantastic in that. And he's totally believable, and he's still doing an accent there. But so I think you're right. I think that it's in the way in the script is written. It's who this character is and why he's doing what he is. And maybe with her, maybe she is trying to match the energy. But I will say this too, and this is where the Oliver Stone thing I think comes through a little bit more than De Palma's. De Palma is an energetic filmmaker, and he can get energetic performances from his actors. But Oliver Stone for sure does. He pushes them to push. And you can just imagine those two working together. I mean, I suppose Mastrantonio came away from this thinking, shit, I gotta go big. These are all big scenes. And every scene I'm in is like, I'm screwing in the ladies' room, or, showing up at the doorway with my boobs hanging out, or, wanting to finally get it on with my brother in a Coke-induced frenzy, or it's like, where's my small scene that I'm supposed to be believable? Oh, that's right, I'm just this large ass character, so I have to play it that big. But that's a good point.
there is a detail in her performance in her last scene where she's, shooting at Tony in the office. When she shoots him in the leg, because she's just kind of firing wildly at him,
Yeah.
kind of almost like cartoonishly around him,
Right.
You expect to see
Dance.
like a bullet
Dance.
outline or something. But when she shoots him in the leg, she cuts back to her and she gives this little like I was like because she's drugged out of her mind and freaked out that her husband's been murdered. But it's almost like that moment of surprise, like, oh, I didn't actually expect to shoot you. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Wow,
I always love that little moment. Yeah.
And it's definitely interesting though, we hinted at it last week when we were talking about the 32 version. The difference in the sister characters, though, between her character, how she's written, and how in the original she was written, because I think we mentioned it, that in this one, Gina Montana is a bit softer than the one in the 32 in many ways. She's not quite as strong in her self as and she wasn't that much in the 32, but there is just a difference in strength between the two. You can see it for sure.
Right.
I don't know. We don't get a lot of Gina in the movie, and we see a lot from Tony's, but if you think about it, she is good against her mom's wishes, certainly against her brother's wishes. Yeah. She is her own independent, night clubbing woman who will hook up with whoever she wants. Tony buys her a hair salon, but it's Gina's hair salon.
Yeah.
Like, she has an ambition to, I guess, cut hair, which is weird considering that giant perm fro she's got.
Oh my God, it's just terrible.
Right. But then, and she also makes the decision to, elope with Manny, and she's the one who's, still standing. I mean, I guess it makes sense because Tony shot Manny in the doorway, but yeah, she comes back with the gun. She's got tremendous agency. It's just like Michelle Pfeiffer's character, who, I was having a conversation about her, like, oh, she's just arm candy. She's just like the kept mob woman we've seen 100 times. But the thing is, she decided to be in that position because it's established that she's like a rich chick from, well-educated from Connecticut, who, once she storms out on Tony Montana, she's like, fuck you, I'm leaving. I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
She's probably going to go back to Connecticut or be with some other gangster somewhere else. So these aren't, yes, they're very attractive women who are in the lives of these guys who the movie is actually about. But if you look at what they're doing and how they carry themselves throughout the movie, they don't get a lot of screen time because the movie's not about them. But they're deceptively powerful, I think, in this movie.
I agree with you. In fact, I think Michelle Pfeiffer gives the best performance in the film. I think there's a lot of great performances, but I think she does so much with the way she carries herself and the way she looks at people and the way there's a sadness, there's a weariness to her. And yet, she's also kind of taking a while to get ready because she wants to matter and sort of not just be like when she first bitches about going to the same club again. Like, she's got some feistiness to her and some, I imagine there were probably 10 pages of backstory that she created for her character. And I think that comes through in the way she comes through it. She also makes one of, I think, dare I say, the greatest entrances in a film in the world, coming down that rather opulent indoor elevator of Frank's. And her back is to the camera. So we see that backless dress. And, for the girl who was sort of suffered through the Grease 2 sequel, for her to sort of reemerge in this as this really sort of slim, almost too skinny, but pale and luminescent sort of
vertical
woman was kind of what's that?
Vertical.
Yeah, it was kind of incredible. I mean, I think she steals every scene she's in, and if anything, over the years I watch it, I always think that she's in it more than she is, because it was such a big performance. She's also one of the ones that Stone is generous to because she gets away.
She does. She does get away.
She's one of the few people who does.
That scene with the glass elevator just reminded me of Vertigo because of De Palma and his love for Hitchcock.
Yes.
I'm just watching it going, interesting setting, Mr. De Palma. But yeah, no, I wasn't trying to say that she was. I think definitely I agree with Michelle Pfeiffer's character is definitely the stronger. I think the difference watching between these two, between Gina and the sister, in the 32 version, maybe it's not so much strength in general, but how she is around Tony is a little better in the 32 version than it is in this one. And I think it's because what we talked about too is them leaning more into the incestuous feeling idea far more in this one than in the 32 version, and maybe that's it, and that's what the difference in her character is, because in the original you feel that she's a little bit stronger towards Tony than in this one. She seems a little bit more able to confront Tony, go a little more toe to toe with Tony in the 32 version versus this one, though neither one the character gets that much screen time. It just seems a bit different, and maybe that's where I'm sensing it from, in that she, in the 32 version, she really is just brother sister, whereas in this one it's a little bit more than that.
But I also think that as they lean into that lurid sort of aspect of it, and we were cresting into all kinds of things like that after the the video revolution that brought porn into the home and pushing the boundaries and stuff like that. I think for Tony, it's also about control and power. Like, I think he wants control over her, and she's feisty like him, and somehow he sees this as somebody that he's got to sort of dominate in a way that, I think he's attracted to her because she's a beautiful woman and everything else. But I also think it's, by all rights, he should certainly be happy that if she was going to go with somebody, she went with his best friend. But instead, it's like he loses the control over her to this other man who he's close to, but can't deal with the fact that that person has a little bit more of an edge on him on anything.
At the point of the movie, though, when he discovers it's Tony goes through a hell of a lot more shit in this film by the time he discovers that his sister's with Manny than he did in the original. In the original, he kind of here too. He goes off, and he gets away for a while because things are heated. But in this one, it's worse. He's in a far worse headspace and situation by the time he discovers his sister is hooked, connected up with Manny.
Right.
He's gone through the ringer a lot more. I think at this point he this is where just after the failed bomb attempt, because he wasn't going to do it with Sosa because they were going to blow up kids, and he's like, no man, I don't do that. He's been through the ringer. That he finds out the IRS is after him. You get the buzz, and so he's gone through all this, and then he discovers, oh yeah, by the way, hey, sis is, shacking up with your best buddy.
Well, it's partially because at this point, the betrayal ramped from all angles.
Right.
He's got, Frank set him up. The crooked cops set him up. Mm-hmm. He got, the thing with Manny. Manny tried to set up this deal that ended up being, a bust, a sting operation. He gets called back down to South America to talk to Sosa about doing this political assassination. And it turns out, like, the people in the room, there's like the sugar company magnate, the U.S. government official, and all these other corrupt people who are betraying the trust that's been ascribed to them. And then Manny, most tellingly, he disappears for a couple of days.
Right.
And then it turns out he's off with Gina getting married, but because Tony finds himself continuously isolated, his best friend is nowhere to be found. It's running through his head like, oh shit, maybe Manny's turned on me too. So when he goes to this house, and Gina walks out on the balcony in her bathrobe, she's like, oh, you son of a bitch. And he just takes him out. It makes sense. Although I got to question Manny and Gina's logic, even in the best of circumstances, because one of the reasons, aside from the incest thing, one of the reasons I think Tony is very leery of Manny is because Manny is a womanizer. Yeah. I mean, it's like the scene right before we see them, I think, at the wedding with the ribbon. It's the wedding to Tony and the Michelle Pfeiffer's character. Manny, I think it's after the nightclub assassination attempt. Manny wakes up in bed and there's a blonde in bed with, like, so I don't know if he's sleeping around on Gina or if she set him straight or whatever, and it's true love. That look that he gives her as he's looking up the balcony at her right before he gets shot seems to be one of true adoration. And there's a real tragedy to it. But if Gina and Manny show up in the best of circumstances, hey, older brother, we just got married, I don't know that he wouldn't have shot them both.
No, see, and I don't know if he would have shot him. I think he would have like beat the crap out of him and just like disown him and not and cut him off. I think if it was under, if Scarface was not in the situation he was at when he discovered it, if he was just like at the peak of his whatever and he finds out, he'd be like, yeah, get the fuck out of my face.
But when did Tony Montana ever let anybody go? Like whenever someone left his life or his inner circle, they did so in a body bag. That's I want to see that alternate reality where they sprung the news on him and for some reason they're all happy. It would have been interesting to see if they had any kind of like hesitation or if Gina was able to say like we weren't sure if Manny thought you might take it like this or something like that, because there's no hesitation. They seem to think, oh, everything's sunshine and roses, even though I've been keeping this a secret because he's a killer.
I think the only way they'd get away with it is if they kept it a secret until she was pregnant. I think if they kept it a secret and she got pregnant, I don't think Tony kills Manny and that he disowns them. He doesn't talk to him anymore ever. But if she is with child, because Tony's got this. He's a fascinating character and the most consistent character in
Scarface. What could have been?
He's one of the most. Hey, that we do that all the time here in the spoiler room.
I think he would have killed him always. I think he would. I mean, he was such a rageful, paranoid fuck that I think he would have either done himself in or done them in or done. I mean, they were one other step on the way to his total destruction.
But
Mark have ever been fair to them.
But Mark, I don't know if this is where you're going with it, and I will let you finish your point because it is your show after all.
No, that's fine.
But no, the bomb situation, like Tony is constantly throughout this movie talking about kids and wanting kids, and he's like disappointed with Michelle Pfeiffer because her womb is polluted. Right?
Her womb is polluted. Yeah.
I wonder. Okay, imagine Gina gets pregnant. Tony kills Manny anyway, and then becomes this kind of surrogate father for the son.
No, I could see that.
Hey, Gina, come here. He needs a little brother. Come on.
Oh no!
Don't resist me. Don't resist me.
It's Scarface is another fascinating piece of cinema in that our main character, our anti-hero, far anti-hero, stays consistent throughout. Usually with a character like this, there's at least a little hint of like remorse at some point or regret or whatever. You get a little scene to where, usually we followed them doing these horrible things throughout. And then you'll get the scene where they're like, oh man, I've just really done some bad things. And then, big bad guys come and then they switch back to bad guy, but you get that little minute of you don't get that with Tony ever. He is one of the most consistent assholes in cinema throughout.
It's a total descent. You're right. And there's no off ramp for even 5 minutes where he has a regret about something or maybe a little bit of sadness. I mean, maybe a tinge as he watches Michelle Pfeiffer walk out the door, but not really. I mean, he's just, you're right. It's kind of a brutal awfulness about him throughout. I also think when he dies, I'm not saying you're cheering for him. I mean, I think obviously his popularity with afterwards is probably like, yeah, I want to live like that and live like him or whatever. But he had it coming.
He did.
There's not a dry eye. There's a lot of dry eyes in the house.
And it's a spectacular fall. Like one thing I noticed again watching it today was just that he falls into the pool.
Yeah.
Or the fountain, whatever.
Right.
And there's just this tremendous, not only just the splash of water, but you really see how much he'd been shot up by the torrents of water that come up from his body before he hits the water.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot. I will say, like, and they had a bit of this in the 32 version. I think they played it up a bit more with Paul Mooney's, another terrific performance. But the guilt over Manny's death in this one, he does feel bad about it. When he's sitting in the office, he does mutter to himself, Manolo, because he realizes that he wishes he had his best friend there to help take on the world. And then when Gina dies in his arms, he does say, he's like kissing her on the forehead, and he's like, I'll be right back. I'll be with you soon.
Yeah.
There is that kind of recognition that everything is kind of coming to an end, and there is a softness to him, but it's also just overridden by all that coke. I swear to God, the prop department, they probably said, sorry, Mr. De Palma, Mr. Stone, we're gonna have a little trouble getting the prop coke to set on time. They're like, no, don't worry, we have it covered.
See, I want to hear like the interview with Pacino about that movie. Like, to me, when he was on the Actors Studio and some of those kind of Inside the Actors Studio and some of those things, he touches on so many movies and stuff, but he could do 2 hours on just talking about what was your experience on Scarface. I mean, it was one of your bigger performances. You're this total awful character. It's ridiculously violent, but it's fun. And then over the years, it's become this sort of classic as well as an influencer on hip hop culture and everything else. What do you think about that, Al? I mean, I just love, because I think, there's so many prestigious films that he's done that still have stood the test of time and add to his vaulted reputation. And this one does too, but for, I mean, there's not a lot of films other than maybe where Al Pacino changes his name to Mochaccino, where he has as much fun on camera, or clearly is having such a ball. I can't believe he still did that for Adam Sandler. What did Adam Sandler do to get Pacino to do that? Anyway.
He probably has pictures.
I have pictures.
Can we talk about just for a minute? I totally forgot watching this that F. Murray Abraham was in this
He's
movie.
The action figure missing from your box set.
Yes.
And watch Omar be thrown out of a helicopter with neck-breaking action. He's dead, but he's still a swinger.
Well, it's great because that mirrors the scene from The Godfather with Abe Vigoda. When he gets taken away by the to go for a little drive. Although I gotta say, watching that scene again today, that is the quickest turnaround from like, hey, why don't you go with these guys? We'll catch up with you in a minute, to like literally a minute later, Montana's looking through those binoculars and F. Murray Abraham has been dragged through the dirt, like his pants are all green. He's been beat to a bloody pulp, and he's got a noose around his neck, and he's in a helicopter that's just taken off. Like, wow, they work fast.
Conscious before he's thrown out, so I'm not sure he even felt the snap. But I know they must have cut something out of that because it goes a little fast.
Well, look at though. I mean, it does go a little fast as far as time goes. Maybe he and maybe Sosa and Tony talk a little bit more because it is rather quick when you get that. But at the same time, you look at Sosa's guys; they're quick in general. That raid on Tony Montana's complex, those guys worked quick. I mean, they dispatch his guards, most of them, like that. It's like they don't hesitate at
it. They took the Gary Oldman school of sending everyone. I mean,
everyone.
What was Sosa's? Oh my God! Look at this first class travel to Miami bill. Oh my God! This is $70,000. Oh, they went into the mini bar. This is bad. I really could have done it with that one guy, the one guy who wears the sunglasses at night. So I can kill Tony with one shot in the back of the head.
Yeah,
I want to know. That's the thing. I want to know more about Sosa. Like when he gets off the phone with Tony Montana, because I really felt for him because the guy made a speech at the UN he wasn't supposed to make. Tony,
you fucked me, Tony. Even my elegant voice now, I could have been in soap operas, but no.
You fucked up, Tony. I told you not to fuck me.
By the way, Paul Chenier is one of those actors who never quite had the career that he probably should have, but he was one of the first actors to play Orson Welles. He played him in a TV movie done in the 70s about the radio show about the Martian landing. He played Orson Welles in that.
Really?
If you listen to his voice, he has a little bit of that in there, but never quite had the career he probably could have, especially with that voice. I mean, he was handsome and his voice was silky and everything else, but same with Greg Henry. Greg Henry, who plays the congressman that made a big splash on Rich Man, Poor Man Book 2. And then thankfully, Brian De Palma put him in a bunch of movies. He was the killer in Body Double, but he also didn't quite have the career that he should have either. Though De Palma brings it back, which, by the way, a little trivia for both of you. In the scene where Tony Montana is being interviewed as he's gotten off the boat, who are the two voices that we don't see interrogating him? They're two standbys.
Well, one of them
films.
One of them, I think, is he plays the cop all the time.
Dennis Franz?
Yes. Ted from Out of Town.
Yeah,
he's one of the guys interviewing him, and the other one is Charles Durning, of course, who was the cop in Sisters.
I thought I recognized Charles Durning too. Yeah. I did recognize the other voice, though. I'm listening to him, and I'm waiting for him to be on screen, and he's not. He's like, "Oh, come on, he's here! It's De Palma. He's here. Where is he?"
I wanted him to mention Ted from Out of Town, but he didn't.
No, he didn't mention Ted.
Who's going to vouch for you, Tony? Ted from Out of Town. You better tell Ted from Out of Town to get downtown and in town and.
I watched another movie I watched for the first time last year was Serpico, and I was it was fun to see. Yes, F. Murray Abraham shows up in that too. So yeah, they had quite the partnership for a couple of years there.
And he's very good in the limited role that he has in Scarface, but he's very good in it too. You know, it's funny. A lot of the people, and this is one of those things with De Palma too, is I don't know if he's great at casting or if it's just these are the actors that the casting directors are saying are the up and comers, the ones who are really impressive. But De Palma has had a great ability over the years to bring these sort of unknowns or barely known actors into the thing. I mean, I think this is Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's first big role, and you know, some of the other people he's given those kind of things. I mean, you think of the young cast in Carrie and some of the other films. I mean, he was the first guy who kind of put Andy Garcia in something, I think, that was notable, or at least, you know, got some attention. So he's had some good thoughts on casting and bringing some, you know, new people sort of to the forefront. And even, you know, F. Murray Abraham, I mean, he was basically the Fruit of the Loom guy, you know, one of the four guys doing that for a number of years, and a theater actor. But this was one of the roles that, you know, he was put in and got some real notoriety for.
Yeah, this movie is full of great. Yeah, this movie is full of great faces and great performances. And that's the thing is, like, you know, when people criticize the performances and the kind of the, you know, ethnic play and all that, I'm like, yeah, maybe, but watch these characters. I mean, even if I don't get the feeling that anybody set out to make a parody of a culture or a cartoon or a racist movie. These, you know, if you take the accent out of it, which I don't know why you would, because it's if nothing else, it's interesting. Yeah, they really dig into these roles and try and make them into real characters. And you know, that scene that you mentioned, Jeff, earlier, the tense scene, the 3 a.m. scene with Frank Lopez and the corrupt cop, it is very tense. It's beautifully acted. And I think it also, in a weird way, a rule of 3, because the person in that room before Tony and his, you know, second, you know, his gunman come in is the barman, the, you know, who ends up becoming one of, you know, Montana's lieutenants.
Right.
And, you know, you shoot Frank Lopez, you shoot the corrupt cop, and you expect the other guy to get it, but he kind of like just says, you know, lets him off, and it's almost like a comedic end to that scene. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, he says, "You need a job."
Yeah,
good. Come by tomorrow. Hey, and then he says, "Congratulations, you got a job."
And his buddy comes up and goes, "Hey, man, congrats, you got a job." And the guy's just like,
Ernie. Yeah, that's right. It was Ernie. Yeah, that was
Ernie. He's just like,
but I mean, he's staying there watching his boss, who he's been kind of It's like shit.
But it goes back to Mark, what you were saying about consistency. Even though Tony is a complete psycho, he still is sort of a code hero, or he has at least a code of weird ethics. Because when he's talking to Sosa, and Sosa is talking about how F. Murphy Abraham's character, he was a rat or suspected rat, or whatever. Yep. Montana says, "Look, I never fucked anybody who didn't have it coming."
Yeah.
And that plays out later. It's like, yeah, Ernie didn't do anything. He was just working for a guy who screwed Tony over, but it's not like he was in on the plan. He probably didn't even know about it.
I also like, one of the things as I've watched this movie over the years is, and this is where it's very shrewd and kind of clever of both De Palma and Stone to put these things in there, is you've got these big scenes and these big violent moments. And that's why I think, the characters are big too, because they're living in this largesse life. But, you get the scenes where Tony's kind of the bank manager is trying to screw him over.
Oh yeah.
Little things like that, where it doesn't matter how much money you have or how much, you're still kind of being shat on, for various reasons and whatever else. And the banker is no more admirable than Tony, but he's still sneering at him and saying like, well, no, we can't do this. And
and Tony,
I think it's interesting that those scenes stay in here, and I think they're important scenes because they're the little bits where, again, like you said, when they introduce all those people in Sosa's room, it's like, shit, these are like all American businessmen.
But it also speaks to kind of like, well, what do you expect? I mean, you can't just honestly bring in weekly duffel bags stuffed with $100 bills, like millions of dollars, and expect to just process that through the IRS. There's got to be an underground network, and a lot of palms need to get greased. So it's like, well, you don't have to deal with this. You could just go back to working as the chef in that greasy roadside spoon, or you can commit to the bit, as they say.
Well, and Tony also has this thing about not wanting to. It's really weird. We're looking at organized crime, but this is a different family of organized crime, because they drop a couple of times, hey, you could get bankers with so and so, and he's like, because they're connected. And when you think connected, you're like, oh, connected to another, like, Cuban mob or drug runners. No, when they say connected, we're looking at kind of a Mr. Scarface situation, to where they're connected. That means they're with actual what's considered mobsters, the Godfather type Italian gangsters, which Tony doesn't want to deal with. So there's this also that hierarchy, but Tony makes that decision as well, as to where he doesn't want to get in with the mobsters, though he's hit such a high level to where everybody and their mother is going, okay, look, you're a high roller now. You can't just fuck everyone and just say, I'm doing this myself, because it's going to bite you in the ass. You have to do these things, even if you don't like them. And that's the problem that Tony has. And that ends up being his downfall, is that he can't get past his ego of, I got to make some compensation. I got to make some compromises. He doesn't want to compromise his character to a fault.
Right. Well, he has an insatiable, literally an insatiable appetite. I mean, Frank Lopez gives him some great advice early on. He says, any day above ground is a good day, Tony. So it's like, he has like Montana Management Company. During that great Pepsi Cola commercial montage, right after he makes that deal with Sosa, and there's like the zoom in on his face, like, hey, talking on the phone and everything, and the opening Gina's salon, and like, he really does have it all. And he could have just maintained. You get the feeling from Lopez looking at Sosa, looking at F. Murray Abraham's character, that there is more of a laid back kind of like, we've got guys to be the animals, to be the killers. We're in management, upper management now. We can chill out a little bit more because we got folks to handle that. But Tony never got out of that killer mindset. He's still scraping his way to a top that he'll never reach, because it doesn't exist. There's nothing high enough for him.
Well, yeah, and even when he hits that high point, he can't get out of his mentality of being in the trenches, being the trench guy, being the worker bee. And in the end, it's a statement. And I've seen comments about this as well, and it's pretty obvious, and it's why I think Oliver Stone takes the immigrant angle, why they address a real historical event. They work that into this with Castro sending people over, and it is true he sent a lot of his political criminals over. He's like, get them out of
He emptied the jails.
He emptied the jails,
the sanitariums.
And so he did that. So they're addressing that, and they're trying to make a statement about the American dream, because you're looking at this coming out in '83, Cold War, and there's started to be that deconstruction of the '50s American dream concept of, hey, come to America, get yourself a business, you work hard, you're going to work up the ladder, and you're going to make it. Here we have a guy who's come from nothing, basically the worst, situations. And yeah, it's the crime, but let's look at this not as crime, as just a business. Let's take the illegal part out of it and look at how he climbs up. He climbs the corporate ladder. He gets his own business. He gets established. He gets rich. He basically, it's the criminal version. I mean, it's the negative, the inverse version, but of the American dream. This guy has climbed and made something of himself, and yet he wants more, and it ends up destroying him. So what are they saying about the American dream of how, is it something that is, either unattainable, or are they saying it's something that'll eventually overtake you and destroy you?
I don't think it's saying either, honestly. I mean, okay, this movie might be saying that, but if you look at what the American dream is, it's the opportunity to come to a place where you can, if you have the ambition, the knowledge, the commitment, and yes, a good deal of luck, you can be and do anything you want to do. Now, sure, it's not easy for anybody to do that in any country under any circumstances, but it's certainly better here in a country of, I'll say so-called free markets and opportunity than under communism.
True.
I mean, there are plenty of people who have, that's why people are still coming here, right? Is because they believe that they want to escape the circumstances that they were in and make something of themselves. The problem is that there are people who are greedy, and there are underground criminal networks who need bodies to throw at different problems. But that is separate from the American dream. They get lumped in a bit because there is corruption, because there is capitalism. Capitalism doesn't necessarily mean corruption. It is just the trading of of goods for services and finances. This is a great parallel movie to an Oliver Stone film, Wall Street, that came out 4 years later. That you can almost imagine these, like you can imagine like Bud Fox turning on his TV and seeing this story about some Cuban gangster who got shot home along with like 30 other people, and him being like, weird, and then going to meet Gordon Gekko.
Which we did talk about Wall Street, folks. Check out the spoiler room where you get that episode where we were doing our stock up episode month. Anyway, sorry. Shameless shill. My shill is showing. My apologies. But this is a fascinating film because there's no real good guys. There's shades of bad guys. It's that kind of it's a noir type story in many respects, in that you've got really the underground you're focusing on, and there's no real, everybody's in their situation, and what they end up getting happen to them is not something that they didn't at least partially deserve, except for maybe Manny, I will say maybe
Manny killed a lot of people,
but Manny killed a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's one of those things where you look at all of this, and probably, I think we said it before, the person who makes out the best out of this entire situation is Michelle Pfeiffer's character, Elvira. She's probably the one that makes it out the best.
Well, and in some respects, that's the morality of this, I think, is whether it's The Sopranos or the Godfather movies, or even things like Road to Perdition. There's the famous line where Paul Newman meets with Tom Hanks later in the movie, and he says, basically, not one of us is going to see heaven because we're all killers. We're all terrible. We've all chosen this life, and we know it. And we know when we decided to choose this life what it meant. And that's kind of true of all these. I mean, you look at the stories about them, and they're every day you could get killed, and maybe you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe you're sitting next to the guy who's got it coming, or whatever. But there's very few people who are sort of in that world that haven't chosen to be there, and probably aren't watching their over their shoulder constantly, because it's just that kind of environment.
Yeah it is. And that's what's that's why this is always interesting on how people embrace this film now and talk about this film, and you look at it going, not really a redeemable character in this entire movie. It's like they're all various levels of not good. I mean, except maybe,
right, but it's also a great, and this is why the adoption of this by certain like pop cultures and subcultures as being this great kind of memeable film. This is a very sad movie, but the glamour aspects of it often get played up, kind of like New Jack City would about 7 years later. But yeah, you watch this as a great cautionary tale, because at any point you can pull over and choose something different. When Tony Montana opens up Montana Management Company, he could have taken his $100 million or however much he had in the bank and said, you know what, I'm going to hand this over to Manny or Ernie or whoever. I'm going to go retire to a private island that I bought. But again, it's never enough.
Well, he's going to call up. I heard about this guy named Gecko who could invest some of my money. There you go.
It becomes about the game, doesn't it? It becomes about this weird sense of and empowerment or something. I mean, even in something where it's more bloodless, like in The Wolf of Wall Street, it's the same thing. How as Bud Fox asks Gordon Gekko, how much better? What do you need? I mean, why did you have to break this company? Because it's breakable. Or the famous line from Chinatown where Jake Gittes asks Noah Cross, how much better can you eat? How much better can you live? And oh no, it's not about that. It's about the future, which is about power, and that's politics. It's about assassination. It's about conspiracy. It's about everything that kind of has the touch, whether it's Illuminati, if we believe in that, or drugs or gangster culture. It really comes down to power, and you're right, Ian. It's never enough, because it's not about the money. It's not about the big whatever that hot tub in the middle of his living room is, or bedroom, with it's so weird.
With the TV,
you just think about like that. I bet you the water in that carpet is discoloring, and it's probably mildewy, but maybe he changes that every other week. I don't know. But it's just they can't even see that after a while. Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street couldn't see how much money he had, and the first 10 minutes of that is him telling you all about, like, that's my home, and I have this, and I have that, and you're going like, fuck me, and it's like, but that's not what this movie's about. It's all about like, hey, I couldn't get past all that because I fucked it all up. I got this big ass yacht and I drove it through a storm because I had to cover my ass in Switzerland. It's all just this weird sense of building more and more, and the corruption that comes with winning at all costs, or grabbing power at all costs.
Well, it's taking the attitude, nobody's going to tell me what to do, is Tony Montana. What control? Any agreement he enters in is something that he's proposed. It's not someone telling him what he's going to do. I mean, at the very beginning, but he doesn't like it. I mean, it's the immediately why he does the about face on his boss, Frank.
Frank.
It's the immediately, he's soft. Literally, he meets him. He meets him once. He literally has the opportunity. He managed to get the Colombian, not only the cocaine, but bring the money back to Frank. And Frank's like, oh shit, this is someone we can work with. And like one meeting, and this, Frank's like a mid-level guy, but still, he's got a little bit of clout. And Tony's like, this guy's not telling me what to do. And we're like, What the hell, dude? You just got into his good graces and you're already saying he's not going to tell you what to do. And I think that's why Tony.
Tony reminds me a little bit of this, and there's that psycho kind of craziness in him. It's Charles Manson. Manson had that chip on his shoulder from early on, and it was all about him doing whatever he could to prove that he was the man.
Yeah.
He was the artist. He was the sex machine. He was the guru. He was the guy who was going to save America when they got into the race war, all that kind of bullshit. And it's just this little man who's been shit on all his life, grew up, already, 10 strikes against him, and somehow just couldn't see the reality of that. So you're right. I mean, he bit every hand that fed him. And, and it's funny. There's a thriftiness and a need to get it fast too. Like I often think about Manson, like he got so mad about Terry Melcher not giving him the contract for the album. And then he went and did the Helter Skelter murders and stuff like that. And it's like, but you know who Terry Melcher is. You've met a bunch of people of the industry. You can wait another 6 months, give another, but no. See, haste is making waste for these people. And Tony is like, he just met Frank, but it's like, I could be better than Frank. I'm tough. He has to hide behind a Mercedes dealership. I mean, seriously, that's probably the mentality that's going on in his head. And like, I've been just waiting to dominate these people. And that's how he was proud that he survived all the stuff he did in prison, everything else. But that's a little man who's been shit on early. And every second is him having to show that he's better.
Right. Well, I mean, even in his first job, that Manny, like, hey, look, we've got, where he meets Abraham's character in that. And they're like, okay, we just need you to go do this. And he's like, that's beneath us. That's like $300. What the fuck? Go fuck. These guys are giving him an opportunity to get away from being a cook. And he's already like, no, give me something better. Otherwise, go fuck yourself.
Tony, it's $300 and you get a nice shower out of it. Come on.
Well, I mean, but at that point, given what we can imagine of his history, it probably is, beneath him.
Yeah.
It's just the people that he's dealing with don't know that because he's just some guy off the boat, literally. Right. But yeah, it is. Yeah. Again, it's very sad.
Go ahead.
Well, it is, I think, a great, cautionary tale. I think it is also, if there's any kind of commentary about like capitalism or the American dream, I think it might be the fact that Michelle Pfeiffer's character is the one who gets away because she can frankly afford to. She can run back to daddy in Connecticut.
That's right.
And do whatever, go to art school or something.
There's privilege and then there's privilege.
Well, isn't she the one that also drops that they aren't winners, they're losers? As well. Yeah, she's the one that tells them that in the cafe. Yeah, she gets that kind of last word in front of everybody. She's like, we're not winners, Tony. We're a bunch of fucking losers.
Yeah, but hey, she ultimately won the game of life, literally, because she survived.
She survived and no one went after her. And yeah, at the end of the day, there you go. So I don't know exactly what that is trying to say, but I'll just say Scarface, awesome movie. Just like the 30s one is an awesome movie. These are both really great movies. And there's a reason why people continue like us are talking about Scarface today, why it was an influential thing into subcultures and into hip hop and that, because of the attitude Tony had of not taking shit from anyone. I mean, that is, there is a powerful statement there to be had about him, and him not compromising his character at any point in this movie. It's very rare you see that in a film. And so there's a lot of cool things going on in this movie. And
a great Giorgio Moroder score too, by the way.
Yes. Well, that's what I wanted to talk. I know we're going a little late, but I wanted to talk about real quick the music. We talk about Tarantino and such about needle drops. De Palma's needle drops in here are spot on with the situation. That's what's going on. From where from She's on Fire, almost every single one of the songs is themed in what you're seeing on screen. The vocal songs, not only the instrumental, but the vocal songs actually fit what's going on. It's not just thrown in there for them to. It's a cheesy 80s music, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's appropriate. It's fitting for what's going on in that film.
But I think it's instrumentation that is sort of cheesy, but I think the actual tension that those chords and Moroder builds, I mean, it's very tense. It's a very, very tense score. And people forget, well, maybe they don't forget, you guys wouldn't forget, but Moroder won an Oscar for the soundtrack to Midnight Express, which was kind of a similar thing, using the electronica, which was big and sort of becoming the new thing, the synthesizers and all that. But he used it for a very sort of tense purpose. It's funny how many movies of that period had that kind of music too. I mean, the first Terminator had a similar kind of track, and
Brad Fidel. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, The Hidden and all different kinds of movies that anything that was a thriller was using a synthesizer as the main instrument in the 80s for sure.
And that's why I've enjoyed my vinyl. TerrorVision is a great company. I know Waxworks does some, but TerrorVision has come out and gotten licensing for some wonderful B-movie 80s soundtracks. You know, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, Demon, Neon Demons. I've got Demon Wind, stuff like that. Things of all things.
Ennio Morricone used the synthesizer, and when he scored The Thing, the score for Creepshow is synthesizer. But it was interesting because that score blended children's voices with sort of tauntiness to nod to the comic thing of it, with the na 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 dun 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 dun. But I mean, the bum 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 bum. That's all electronic synthesizer. I mean, it was just that period.
And even stuff like the gate net. Well, where I was going with that is you have the big Hollywood guys doing this stuff, but that was one part where everybody was on the same level, because the same techniques they were using for these bigger movies like Scarface and that, these guys for B movies were doing it. And this is synth stuff. And this is stuff that was new technology. So these guys are making it. You reading the liner notes from a lot of my TerrorVision records where they're talking about these guys who did these synth scores, and they're talking about how they recorded the whole damn thing in their living room with 3 different synthesizers. And some of them talked about, this sound wasn't made. We had to go out and make this sound and add it to this, and
the person who changed everything was Moroder, because he started in the late 70s. He did all the Donna Summer things, that I feel love, and he did Fame and other things. But then the other one who cemented it was Vangelis, of course, with Chariots of Fire, which to this day I still think it's kind of an amazing thing that here's this 1920s, early 30s period piece, and the director, I think his name was Hugh. Hugh Hudson was Hugh Hudson might have been the producer of that.
I think he was the producer.
But the director of it, who I'm blanking on his name right now, he chose to go with a contemporary track. You could have thought, he'll do some big full symphony like John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith were doing for everything. And he got Vangelis to do the ding, 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 ding. It was just that one man and his synthesizer probably in his living room.
Hugh Hudson was the director. So
David Putnam was the producer. That's right. Hugh Hudson was the director.
So there you have it, folks. Scarface. It is a classic. I think we'll all agree that we'd all recommend you seeing it. It's if you watch this, you'll see also influences from this as well into later films. You can see Tarantino influence. This,
for sure.
You can see a lot of Tarantino films in Scarface. Not saying it in a bad way. See, that's the thing is, I think people sometimes get misconstrued when you're either comparing it to another film or whatnot. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just showing you. I mean, De Palma, we've talked about many of his films here in the spoiler room and how much he borrowed from Alfred. And there's that debate. Is he ripping him off, or is he just influenced? He thought it was so good that he wanted to do it the same thing. It's like, is that necessarily a bad thing? The fact that, they say was that mimicry is the highest form of
imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So
yes.
phrase goes.
So there you go. So,
or they say, if you're going to steal, steal from the best, right?
Oh, there you go. Exactly. If you're going to steal from the best. Now, before we get to License to Shill, I have a little housekeeping to do, folks. Well, I think we'd all recommend Scarface. Yes, gentlemen, we'd all.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Final thought. We have a little housekeeping. I forgot to do this last week during our rated PC for pre-code, is choosing next month's pre-code movies. So we do have the wheel of random here for us today.
Oh, no.
And we are going to spin the wheel of random to see what next month's pre-code special movie is going to be. Round and around we go where it stops. Alibi 1929 is the film that it's going to be our next it's going to be our next pre-code movie next week and next month.
You can't get the three of us to vote on it like we're the Pulitzers for
no
for
this
theater.
No, God, no,
damn it, three critics who vote on the Pulitzer for theater for drama.
Really?
Yep.
Whew. No, this is my damn show, and I'm going to decide how I want to do it.
Okay, Mark.
You can't tell me what to do. This is my show.
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just trying to influence you.
I know you're trying to influence me. I ain't going to take that, Mang. I'm not going to take that, Mang.
I mean, I was going to just say, not to guilt you, but as the movie, the horror aficionado, I can't believe you would still not be talking about the horror movies that made it onto the screen pre-code, like King Kong and
we've got King
Jekyll
Kong.
and Hyde.
We've got King Kong and M on there. We've got a couple others.
How about Freaks?
Freaks is not on there.
Mark, I'm also waiting for your weren't we going to do a movie score special too?
At some point, possibly. I know we had talked about doing something there. Yeah.
Yes, it's
between the two of you, you both have a wonderful podcast. I'm waiting to be the guest. Just call me when you're ready.
Listen out, sir. Listen out.
You're a guest but you're a guest right now. No, just kidding.
I'm quickly becoming the Charles Nelson Riley of both of your shows, taking over the show and turning it into something wrong.
Yes. So next week,
aren't I going to do movie scores?
And so next week, yes, Alibi 1929. I will have a themed month around Alibi. Guess what? Films with the name Alibi in it. That's going to be a fun one. Oh, yeah.
Oh, Tom Selleck's My Alibi.
Yeah. There's that in there. I think I put that on the list. Yeah, it might be on there. I'm not sure yet. I got to pull up my list for that. But yes, let me take a look quick. Well, you brought it up. Way to go. Okay, so next month is going to be. No, we don't have My Alibi on there. So it's going to be My Alibi month is what it is. It's My Alibi month.
Without My Alibi.
And I don't know which weeks we will do it yet, but we will be doing the Alibi from 1929. We will be doing Dark Alibi 1946, The Third Alibi 1961, and Lies and Alibis from 2006. Oh, yeah.
All right.
And why? Because I love finding movies like this that nobody talks about. Because does it get me more listeners? Probably not. But I'm interested. I want to see what these other movies are about. There's so much to watch out there. You never know what you might find. So, I'm excited. That's My Alibi. I could have done a Tom Selleck Alibi movie, but people know those movies. They might not know these films. So, that's where I'm at. So that's tentatively what the list is, as long as they're still all available for streaming or some sort. So prepare yourself for My Alibi month next month in February. That's the Valentine's Day month too. So it's good to have an alibi during that month.
I thought you might come full circle and make it all about showers, since we started the episode about Ian in the shower.
We talked about Ian in the shower. We talked about, chainsaws in the shower. So there you go. And now this is where I give my wonderful crew the license to shill. So please, Mr. Jeff York, the floor is yours.
Well, as you can see, I have a blog where I do my movie reviews called theestablishingshot.org. I write 2 features a month and do caricatures for the Pipeline Artist magazine online as well, pipelineartist.com. Doing some TikTok videos, guesting on shows like your wonderful programs, and currently illustrating my 7th book with caricatures for a book about stories from the theater. And I can't tell you, I don't think anything more about it yet, but that's my current sort of weekend project. Oh, and I'm also, I don't know when this will go out, but I'm participating in the International Society of Caricature Artists, 31 caricatures in 31 days of January, having to do one every day, which is, it's my task from 10 to 12, and now will be my task from 11 to 1. I do it to give myself 2 hours, and I do it each night at 10.
Nice.
I was gonna ask if you were gonna bring that up, Jeff.
Oh, well, thank you.
Really cool. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
That is very cool. Absolutely. And Mr. Ian Simmons, license to shill is yours.
I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I'm also right here on YouTube. If you look up YouTube and Kicking the Seat, you'll find me there. Do weekly podcasts and live streams and all that good stuff. I'm here on Mondays talking about movies with Mark, which, I'm glad that's not the name of the show. Spoiler Room is much better. Yeah.
He's here slumming it with me, just like Mr. York is slumming it with me as well. So
I consider it a promotion.
But as far as what's coming up on specialmarkproductions.com, I dropped 6 reviews last week. I've got another 4 this week, plus a written one coming, at least one. I also have an interview coming out. Again, we talked with him last month about his other film, Pig Killer. This month, we will be talking about his film, Scalper. We're talking to filmmaker Chad Farron, and we're going to have also Kate Patel, who plays a character in Scalper as well, a detective. And she was the lead actress in Pig Killer. It both had Jake Busey in them. Highly recommend both of them if you're interested. Pig Killer was actually about a real serial killer in Canada. Go figure. You don't get many of those. And this one is, like I said, a sequel to his film Nightcaller. So we got that interview coming up, and I'm lining up some other interviews. I've got a kind of wish list this year of interviewers, people I want to interview. So I actually have some goals this year. Oh my God. Obviously, though, it's not a goal to keep the podcast shorter. So that I apologize for. But in any case, thank you so much for our live streamers who tuned in tonight to view. We appreciate you. I appreciate all my listeners. Please spread the word and keep things going. We got a lot of great stuff coming up this year. And hope you stick around and tune in. So until then, everyone, stay safe, stay warm, and we'll say a good night, everyone.